Okay, well, it's 9:02. We might as well get going. If anybody else jumps in, then they won't know what's going on, but that's fine. So good morning, everyone. I'm Sara Becker. I'm with Ideal Contract Services. I am replacing Avel today. I'm facilitating this session. FYI, this is my first time facilitating and my first time kind of running a meeting on Teams. So please be really patient with me. I have no idea what I'm doing. Adventures. So everybody's basically muted right now except for Brian and Shafraaz. That's going to stay that way for a little bit. If you didn't notice already, we've already started recording. So if you wanted to be a ninja, too bad, or leave. Because otherwise your mug is going to be on YouTube. So at the end of this conversation, kind of Barbara Walters style face-off here with Brian and Shafraaz, we're going to do a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout this presentation kind of thing, please bring them up. We're happy to answer, and other people in the community, I'm sure, would be happy to answer too. So I am part of this community of volunteers that run the Edmonton Lean Community of Practice, or Lean-YEG. We host a Lean Coffee session on the third Friday of every month from September to June at 9 a.m., sometimes virtual, sometimes in person. At these events, Lean practitioners meet to discuss or learn about our favorite topic, which is Lean in our community. Sometimes we have like a structured agenda that's less but fun-filled conversation. But today is a presentation from Brian and Shafraaz. We're going to be talking about virtual pole planning tools. Miro, introduce. We've got Shafraaz Kaba and Brian McEachern. Shafraaz is with Ask for a Better World, and Brian's with PCL Construction. So we're going to listen to Shafraaz kind of talk about consultant perspective of what it's like to actually get pole planning tools for yourself, what that experience feels like, what that process is, and then we're going to hear from Brian about kind of his experience on site, on the ground, how it is working with subcontractors from a general contractor's perspective, with Lean tools, and how that all works together. So, Shafraaz, do you want to get started here?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate the intro. And I guess my background has been in a lot of integrated project delivery work for the last 10 years. And that's sort of where, obviously pre-pandemic, we would have started with sticky notes. And I think that's sort of what I'm comparing all of our virtual tools to, is like, how do they compare to our tried and true basic, write a note on a sticky and post it on the swim lane and talk about pole planning. And how that works, for maybe really a quick primer, is there's different timescales in which we're trying to plan, right? So when we pole plan, we want to set up that master milestone schedule and then break it down into more and more specific times for handoffs. So a phase plan in between milestones helps us really break down the tasks into those stickies, and it starts to help us then break those down further when we hand it off to Brian or a constructor for look ahead planning, particularly in that 6-week look ahead phase, and then that helps build work plans, etc. So we've used pole planning really in the design phase to help really from start to finish, even in the design phase, work with the designers, the consultants, the trades, even the GC, to figure out what we need to get done for drawings that provide the estimator enough information to price, as well as drawings for permitting. And I think the last little bit I want to say is, whenever we looked at pole planning tools, we really wanted to make sure they create the information that we need to have on those little stickies. So what do I need to get from someone so I can give my work to the next person in line? So what do I request or get, and what do I promise to be able to deliver, and how those connect together? And so, in our first kick at pole planning, we actually used Miro, which is an online collaboration tool, because it was free and it was easy, and it was basically, you make your stickies, you make whatever graphic opportunities you want, and it even created connector lines. So in Miro, it was pretty sweet to have something very flexible that allowed us to basically use sticky notes virtually in a very easy way. So you're able to create there's a limited number of colors, but you're able to create the swim lanes, tag the different disciplines, and you're able to connect them together. And as you can see, we have milestones in those green diamond-shaped swim lanes. We have the stickies, we have the swim lanes, we have a timeline at the top. And for a long time, this was the easiest, best, most flexible way, and sometimes still is, depending on the team, of how we would work. So since using Miro, we've now been able to work on larger projects that could afford larger and bigger, more expensive tools. And some of that is interesting in that we wanted to really make sure those tools did what we could do with a simple sticky note. So Brian and I, it's a little blurry, have worked on Nialli boards. Now, I've worked on Nialli purely virtually and not using these physical boards that they're able to sell you to be able to do kind of virtual whiteboarding with that. And I've also used Touchplan, which is actually far more graphically nicer to the eyes. So Touchplan actually is almost similar to how it looks and feels when we used Miro. The colors are a little, and the ability to build swim lanes I find far more fluid and interesting. But really, what I'm looking for in pole planning tools is to figure out how best to mimic the tried and true sticky note that we write the vital information for, and we create those network of commitments really to make work. So I kind of want to have a good discussion about some of what works and what doesn't work, and we'll see how that goes.
So when you were thinking about going virtual, why? Like, what prompted that? What made you go virtual?
The lockdown.
Mainly? Yeah.
Well, part of it was how COVID kind of challenged us to work remotely and deal with when we weren't able to meet in person. So really the very first scramble was, oh dear, we can't meet in person. So how do we create pole planning, which is very, very interactive, where you're all standing around sort of a wall with sticky notes, and try to make that work. So when the pandemic kind of happened, we tried several things. We even tried Jamboard on the Google platform, where it creates really basic sticky notes. And for a while that was okay, but Jamboard limits the space. When we used Miro, it's like Miro has infinite space. You can make a pole plan very, very long. You could zoom in and zoom out really easily. And like I said, it basically is a virtual sticky note. So you can kind of use it just like you would writing a sticky on the wall.
Okay. So when you were looking for pull planning software, one of the main considerations was having space for all the data. Was there, what else was there for consideration for you other than cost, obviously?
One of the interesting critiques I have is I'm a Mac person. So Nialli is best on a PC. It only has a web interface for Mac PCs unless I want to emulate a PC on my Mac, which takes more power and has to be screen switched and all of that. So obviously the software and its platform was a consideration. And then also as a architect, the graphics also and the ability to see and understand without creating a major mess of things helped. So as I showed you in some slides, like Miro is actually really easy to use, but it's really easy to make a mess. So the software that's out there helps it get more regimented, helps it create automatically the swim lanes, helps you create every single post-it or sticky note the same size, and it also tags typically the most important information required.
So when you started with pull planning software, did you do any kind of training at all, or did you just kind of let's try this,
awesome.
see what happens?
Awesome question. Miro was really easy as we showed people in 4 easy steps how to make a sticky note and put it where it needs to go. The Touchplan and Nialli is a little bit more sophisticated, and that's one of the interesting things I have discovered working with certain teams right now is certain people are actually reluctant to do the tutorials and do the training or take the time to go in there and really understand the power of some of the back of house items in Nialli or Touchplan. Like you can customize or add so much more information if you really wanted in terms of schedule, in terms of number of people on a certain task or a team. You can be very particular about dates and instead of creating a one sticky, it creates duration bars. So it's pretty neat for that.
At this point, should we talk with Brian about how this moves on the site?
I've got lots of opinions on what Shafraaz just talked about.
Awesome.
So we started doing digital last planner, and I'm reluctant to call it pull planning because I always look at pull planning as part of last planner system. So you'll hear me say digital last planner instead of digital pull planning a lot. We started using digital last planner before COVID. I'm one of those people that was very reluctant to move to a technology solution to go digital away from the sticky notes, because I'm still very much go and put the sticky note on the wall, and that's me making a commitment. So that's where I was afraid of moving to a digital platform, because what we didn't want to lose is the collaboration piece, the people working together piece, the people making commitments piece. And what we were afraid of is that, if we start doing this digitally, are people just going to be either on their phones? Is it going to be, a hindrance for people to use technology? So then is it going to be one of our people making the sticky notes for people and putting them in the wall? So then are we starting to lose what is actually going on with Last Planner? So my biggest fear with it, and it still is that we rely on technology to do the process for us, which is completely backwards. So one of the things that I say to people all the time, internally, externally, whoever will listen to me, is that no matter what tool you use, whether it's Miro, Nuriva, or Nialli, Touchplan, Bosch, whatever you want to use, it doesn't replace a bad process. So in this grand scheme of thing, yeah, we're going to talk about digital last planner tools. Don't forget that if you have a bad process, a digital tool isn't going to fix that for you, and it can't. So we've had teams even that have struggled through using one tool, said the tool sucks, I want to use a different one, use a different one. For whatever reason, it still doesn't work. Well, guess what? What's the common denominator here? Your process wasn't good. So then we've taken them right back to sticky notes because the digital tool is not making it any better. So we go back to, let's go back to the basics, and I'm not an architect. I was a technologist way back when. And when I learned to draw things, I learned to draw by hand. And then I started using AutoCAD. No different in this case. Make sure that we've got the process going and working, and then we can move to a digital tool. So I really want to stress that all the stuff that we're talking about is great, and some of the reasons why we went for digital is for some of these other things I'll talk about. But if you're struggling with it, go back to the tried and true, using sticky notes, making commitments, and really focusing on the process. So some of the reasons that we went to it is just inherently our project teams are always looking to make things better, always looking to improve. So there's waste in using sticky notes and just the analog, I'm going to call it, method of last planner system. So and I kind of always use the electricians as the example because they always are having to write out so many sticky notes for pulling cable, rough in, all that stuff, right? It takes a long time. So they're writing out so many. Utilizing technology to be able to just say that I'm, working in this area, doing this task, and it's going to take me 10 days, and boom, it can create it for you rather than writing out all 10 sticky notes, is a huge thing. Some of the things like even just automatically calculating your PPC and having data right there available for you. The way that we do it with sticky notes, we mark them all off, we take a picture, and we take them all off the wall, and now they're nowhere to be found again other than in that photo that was taken and then whatever you've recorded somewhere. Digital solutions allow you to always have the data there. You can always go back and look at it. The history doesn't go away, so it's not like you've pulled everything off the wall and you have to rely on some kind of picture or anything like that. It's always there for you. So some of that stuff was a lot of the benefits. We started looking at software 3-4 years ago, when the question ultimately started coming up, like, how can we make Last Planner better? And so we started looking at all these different ones, and ultimately we started working with Nuriva at the time, who's now Nialli, and helping them with kind of beta testing and working through their creation of that software. And Shafraaz showed a picture of the walls that they have. So we've got project teams that just do this on a TV, that have done it virtually, but have also used the walls. And the walls are pretty cool. It pretty much just mimics actual boards with sticky notes, which is pretty sweet. Those touch boards don't work with every program. Like, I think they do work really well with something like Nialli or even Miro. But there's all different ways you can do it, and there's no one thing works best for everybody. And so you can do it all different types of ways. But once we start getting into what we're doing, you started to talk about training and all that stuff. When we started looking at some of these, so we've looked at, I get calls almost every other month from a different company that does digital last planner. So, but the ones that we use, or we use Nialli. We use Bosch's program a little bit in one of our districts, and we've tried Touchplan a little bit here and there. And we still use Miro. Like, I used Miro earlier this week with a design team, which was done virtually. So we still do use Miro, but we usually use Miro for kind of higher level phase pulls, not so much for weekly planning, because it's just a lot of copying and pasting. And like Shafraaz says, you can make a mess really easily in there. And especially if you don't have someone who really kind of understands how Miro works, and you're freezing stuff and all that, you can be moving things all over the place in there. But it works, right? It's very similar to the sticky notes. So the one that we gravitated towards the most is Nialli, because from our perspective, it mimics the analog process the best. There's been pros and cons to each of these programs, and I've got little sheets on all of them. But the one that we kind of started to really use the most is Nialli, just because it's easy to use, and it kind of mimics what we do with sticky notes the best.
It's also inexpensive relative to some others.
Yeah, I think we were going to talk about price at some point, and yeah, that's a pro and con on all of these things. Yes.
Well, Brian, you're talking about how with your teams, if your process isn't there, it doesn't make any sense to go virtually. What kinds of characteristics from your team are you kind of looking for to say, okay, this team can handle virtual profiling?
Yeah, we want them to be, pretty well versed in how Last Planner system works. We want them to be like a healthy team of when we come together in our weekly meetings, they're collaborating, they're making commitments. We don't have people that are just sitting off in the corner. It's not the PCL person or the GC person creating all the tags and just dictating what the master schedule actually is, just visually. Sometimes that happens, right? It just turns into a visual representation of what our master schedule is, and our superintendent just saying, well, this is what's going to happen, and we just put it up on the board to make it look like my schedule. That's not the point, right? The point is we take the milestones from our master schedule, which are set in place, right? We don't move those. But then we get everybody together to actually figure out what the best way to move forward to meet those milestones are. And our supers start to become more facilitators rather than dictators, maybe not the right word, but the kind of command and control kind of way. We want them to be a facilitator or a conductor, and getting everybody involved in the conversation. And when they're doing that well, moving to digital is easy, right? The hardest part about moving at that point is just making sure that we can train them how to use the software properly.
So here's an uncomfortable question.
Yeah. I love it.
So, we're looking at this big construction world right now, where there's a lot of subcontractors I know on this in this meeting, mm-hmm. Who have maybe been forced to use pull planning tools by their general contractor. Sure. Which, of course, you represent all general contractors currently.
Oh, boy.
So, I personally have seen or heard of people having to be a part of this pull planning system virtually, and maybe that GC is being kind of, dictative as opposed to facilitative.
Yep.
What would you suggest for those subcontractors to kind of flip the script or make the process work better for them? Or, how do you deal with virtual pull planning?
Get that volume onto the speakers.
We had someone else talking there.
Right now, it's set up.
Oh, there. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. Like part of if we as general contractors are really key or really into actually doing Last Planner system, we should be open to hearing the feedback from the subtrades or subcontractors, sorry, that what we're doing isn't working, or that there's a better way to do things. When projects get into kind of tight spots and everything, we tend to go back to what we feel comfortable with, and even though Last Planner has been around for a number of years now, it's still new. We don't do it enough as an industry to really make it the way that we do things. So
it's not standard yet.
It's not. And unfortunately, and I can say this about us, but from going from one contractor to another, you're probably going to see something slightly different, which is unfortunate. But even within companies, and we're obviously a large company, and we see that a little bit from job site to job site, where it kind of does things a little bit differently, and we're trying to get better at that. And different businesses do things different ways. So I don't think we'll ever get away from one company doing it slightly different than another, unfortunately. But ultimately, the high level process and the way that we do things and the reasoning for doing things should be the same, right? The reason that we do Last Planner is to collaborate, get a better plan, work together, create flow on the job site. That's what we're ultimately trying to do. And if it's not working, should ask the question, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the weekly meeting. It could be after the meeting, saying to whoever's running it, this isn't going the way that we understand Last Planner to actually function.
Yeah, be hard on the process, not the people.
Yeah,
I totally agree. Like Brian's mentioned, it's if the process isn't working, a tool isn't going to fix it. So
yes.
you have to really marshal the troops and say, okay, let's actually go back to basics. We've actually done that very same thing on one of them.
We've had projects do that. Yeah.
Question for both of you. What are kind of the common mistakes that people make when they get into virtual pull planning specifically?
You can go ahead, Shafraaz, if you want.
Okay. I think it's trying to do all of the different timescales at once. So again, it's like looking at the process and saying we have to set up the milestones first and agree to the milestones, the end dates, and really negotiate the timeline of those, and then systematically tackling each phase of tasks in between. And it gets and the thing that we struggle with, everyone wants to know the entire project duration start to finish. Like no. Let's actually focus this to what is relevant in the next little while, because things will change, and trying to just keep people focused on the right time scale and the right project phase to flesh out is probably where I have the hardest time herding the cats. Like, nope, don't go over there. Come back here, focus. The good thing about Miro is you can draw everyone to a screen. And I wish there was that function on Nialli or others. Like, hey, stop looking 2 years down the road. We need to talk about the next 6 weeks, darn it. So
you know what, Shafraaz? I wish that was a function in life, where I could draw everybody to focus on me. Karen's got her hand up. Karen, do you have a question?
Yeah, I had a couple questions actually related to what Shafraaz and Brian are saying. One is to do with what Shafraaz just said, which was like the time scale. And I'm wondering about both of the softwares that you guys are using, whether those deal with that time scale well, because like if you have stickies and they're done weekly, but sometimes you need to actually step back and look at just the milestones. And if you're doing Miro, it's harder to see that because it's lost in all of the stickies. So do those sort of filter that way? And then like the other thing with Miro for doing a pull plan is that it's great for people. They can go into the board and they can zoom in and look around on their own, but it's horrible if you ever have to try and output that into a different format, like put it in a design report or something, because it's just extremely long, extremely big. You can't get zoomed in. And also the level of detail is probably not necessarily what you need for some of these other things where you might have to send to external. So I wondered if you guys could talk a bit about the software and how you use that. And then relating to what Brian said about his example about the electricians, whether in the software there's the ability to do templates of tasks that you can then just repeat all the time, so you're not creating it from scratch for things that are definitely the same task from project to project or even from phase to phase. So anyway, thank you. Those are my two questions.
Yeah, Karen, that's the benefit of using dedicated programs, right? We can use some better than others, but yes, you can print out a 6-week look ahead, an 8-week look ahead, whatever. You can print out an exact replica of kind of what you've got there. So the benefit of doing something other than Miro, and like I said, Miro, I like Miro for phase pulls. I'm not too keen on it for weekly planning. I think it's very difficult to do that in Miro. But with all the other programs, they have different ways to output reports and all that fun stuff. And then the other benefit is you can copy and paste things. So you can copy chunks of work, you can copy swim lanes. So for us, that's from a construction standpoint, if we're doing a vertical tower, and we've got, we're doing structure and we've got kind of a setup of, okay, here's generally what we're going to do floor to floor to floor. Once we get one, we can start to copy it and we can move it and then massage it so that we don't have to always recreate all the time. So that is a definite benefit. And that's one of the, again, what I said before, there's inherent waste in the way that we do it in an analog kind of function. Once you move to digital, you can start to remove some of that waste by the benefit of just using a computer program. So you can start to do that. Where you need to be careful though is that you don't lose the collaboration, communication, and all that stuff by just taking and saying, well, hitting the easy button almost and saying, well, we did it over here, let's just put it over here, and not talk to anybody about it, or make sure that you're discussing it, because it all comes back to that, the understanding of what's going
on. Awesome. Okay, are you guys ready to get to the nitty gritty here? Get your boxing on and
sure.
Let's do it. Speaking of Miro.
Yeah, 100%. Is this working properly? I don't know what I'm doing with now. Okay.
I can see it.
Sweet. Look at that, winning. So these guys are going to duke it out now. We're going to talk about kind of the three main systems that you guys have experience with. I guess this was kind of decided by both of you.
Yep.
We're going to talk about ease of use, the visuals, whether it's collaborative or whether it's good communication or not, whether it's the right amount of information, and kind of what the price point looks like. And then we'll see if there's a winner or a loser or neither. So talk about Touchplan. And be honest, like, okay, I guess I should have a disclaimer here. The opinions of these two fine gentlemen do not reflect the opinions of Lean-YEG as a whole. We are not to defame any companies or belittle any software to the point that nobody will buy it. We just are making comments and opinions that are very personal to these two guys.
I love it.
Is that fair?
Sure.
Oh.
Okay.
Right. Touchplan.
Well, it works on my Mac, so it's already more helpful than Nialli in terms of operability. It also, for someone who is visually sensitive, it's a more cleaner, less clunky visual interface. It feels more intuitive. So.
Yeah, I can. I'm gonna look at my cheat sheet over here because I've got pros and cons of it over here. I consider Touchplan to have the best user interface and tool set of these ones, and including some others. I think it's got the best UI. It's very polished and has a refined feel, kind of like what Shafraaz is saying. We're not Mac users, but I do understand where Shafraaz is coming from, because we've had people that we've dealt with that are Mac users, and so yeah, I get that. The way that they do going from a phase pull into daily work planning is crazy, like just so good. You basically create a phase pull, and then there's like a bar that you slide across them, and it turns them from a phase pull into weekly tasks. Like it's really slick. The other one that we read that, you know, our especially our superintendents, and I know James is on here, and I don't know if he's seen Touchplan, but one of the things that our supers really like about it is that at the top of the screen, it actually does a little chart that tracks the number of workers on site based on whoever it is. So if we've got, you know, the drywall company has 8 people and that's what's planned on here, it'll tell you at the top really easily that how many people, excuse me, are on site. They also have an integrated mobile app with a high level of functionality. So it's not just a going to a website or a web version. There's actually an app that you can use for it.
Okay. What sucks about it? You guys are being very kind.
Well, I've got some
I
things that I don't
blood.
like.
It is complex, right? It
Yeah.
has this one you do need to provide or have people go through tutorials because it is sophisticated and has lots of different ways to add constraints, add this, add that. So there's a lot of tools it has I think, a learning curve. Or at least I feel people have to, you know, do more than a 5-minute tutorial to really understand what they should do to use it well. So it's getting people to take the time to do that.
I agree with that. If I compare it directly to Nialli, I would say it's less intuitive than what Nialli is, especially for the people that use it on site. I think, and I always look at these things through the lens of our site workers, because technology isn't generally our first number one tool, right? We're building things and we're using, you know, tools and things like that. So technology it's not that we don't know how to use technology, but it's not our number one thing. So when I look at it, that I agree, it's more complicated to use. Not that it's complex, but it is more complicated and less intuitive than say Nialli for sure.
Are you still using fax machines on site, Brian?
James is shaking his head no, so I'm going to go with him and say no.
Awesome.
That doesn't mean there isn't one still around somewhere.
So you were saying as a plus that there's an awesome mobile app,
yep.
But then you're also saying that it's not great on site. What do you mean?
No, I don't say it's not. I'm not saying it's not great. I'm just, in comparison, it's a little bit more complicated to use than say Nialli.
You mean like more steps?
More sophisticated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's more options or more you can add a heck of a lot of data or information, like the number of your crew, the billable rates, like
more customizable, right?
Yeah.
So like Apple versus Android. Android you can change everything, Apple you can't change it. Kind of similar?
Kind of similar, maybe. Yeah. There's one more big drawback in my mind with this one. Cost.
Oh,
yes. Yeah. Dollars.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to Nialli?
Yes.
Sure. I find it a little clunkier. So, and again, but this one kind of tries its best to just mimic what an actual sticky is and tries to say, this is a grid of stickies and this is how you're going to use the process of Last Planner system to really keep it simple.
Yeah, it's like you're reading the first note on my screen over here. I 100% agree. It's the best tool that replicates the look and feel of physical sticky notes on a board for a Last Planner system.
Speaking of sticky notes, sorry, just a little side note. Avel shared in the chat this. actually print Post-it.
$1 million idea already done.
Sorry.
Gosh.
I think I'm gonna buy one the next time we do a pole planning session.
There you go.
Awesome.
Here's how fast it'll be.
Well, it's about
mean,
the same cost as buying sticky notes, right? So
Yeah.
I might
But
test
but
it
does
out.
it do it super sticky? That's the key.
That is the key. Yes.
Yeah, it might be the crappy stickies. Whatever.
Yeah, I will say construction workers do not always have the best handwriting, so that could come in really useful. Legit. Like passing notes in junior high. You know, do you like me or not? I can't tell. Like, what does this say? Anyway, sorry. Continue, guys.
So I
go ahead.
find
Go ahead.
Nialli visually unappealing. So as an architect, it hurts my eyes. Yes, it's ugly.
So this is where the gloves will come on, I guess. From a builder standpoint, I like the way that it looks. So and I don't have the refined visual palette of what Shafraaz has, but I prefer the way that Nialli looks versus the way that the stuff does.
So this is Touchplan. This is Nialli.
Yep, I like the look of that better.
No.
There you go. I got a thumbs up from.
Anyway, I'm not super keen on the lack of colors in Nialli. Like I've run into a limitation on the color palette because you're trying to create swim lanes by color coding them, and for some reason, there isn't as much choice, or at least complementary colors where it looks nice. And maybe it's just my architectural snobbiness, but that is what it is.
No, I'd say it's
Absolutely.
absolutely. One of the other ones that I want to talk about, this one is it is easy to train. Like with it takes half an hour of showing people how to use it and you've got it. There's no big thing like a whole bunch of menus across the top or anything like that. Everything is there, and it's pretty intuitive on what you need to do. It doesn't take a lot of effort to actually learn how to use it, which a lot of the people that we deal with appreciate, and they don't become scared of it.
Yeah, there's less things to mess up with.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. The other one, and this is maybe a I don't know if it's a plus on this one and a delta on Touchplan. Nialli works well with touchscreen boards, whereas I don't think Touchplan is really kind of geared towards that. Nialli was built for that. So if you do have, whether it's a touch screen or whatever, like it's got some pretty neat little gestures, right? To status of tag, you basically spin the tag on the screen. So it's pretty good when it comes to actually using a touchscreen or some kind of board. Now, I do have some negatives for it too. It doesn't have a mobile app in it, and using it with a Mac, it sucks. Let's just say what it is. The web interface is not very good either. So the best way to use Nialli is to install the desktop application on your computer. It's currently, anyway. I know that they're doing something to come up with whatever they're going to call it, 2.0 or whatever. But and the high level metrics within Nialli are not easily able to. You're not easily able to get to them. There is a way to do it through Power BI, through like a kind of analytics thing that opens up Power BI, and you can get all kinds of information. But that's difficult for most people unless you're kind of a Power BI user. So I wish that there was some more stuff that was kind of right there for you. Like it is like PPC and reasons for variance and all that's right there and easy to see and easy to use. But some of the higher level metrics are difficult to get to.
Last question, is it expensive?
I find, well,
it's subscription based, right?
Yes. Yeah, it is. So you purchase a number of plans. So, you can, and for someone like us, where we can, buy a pack of say 10 plans or 20 plans or 30 plans or whatever, we can scale it then as well. So I would say from a cost per project basis, it's fairly affordable.
And they've been actually really good with us. They allowed us to beta test some tools, and we've suggested some new ideas. So the folks at Nialli were super accommodating. It's like, oh, you want this feature? Okay, let me try and build that. Like they kind of beta built it and said, hey, try this out on your next pull. It's like, oh wow.
Mhm.
They
Okay.
have very good customer service, and they're a really good group to work with. I would say on the flip side to that, and I do have that as kind of maybe a little bit of a drawback, is because of the company size, there's like limited feature releases kind of throughout the year. They're keeping up, but I think some of their competitors who are bigger companies pump out more new features, on a more regular basis.
Okay, Miro.
Super
Easy
cheap, super basic, as you build your own kind of template to pull, right? You kind of need to build your own swim lanes, build your own, format of how you want it to work. So, so yeah, and in the beginning of us doing Last Planner virtually, this was our go-to. And as Brian said, after a milestone or a phase pull, it becomes a little too there's the sticky notes aren't big enough or can't hold the data that we need to have in it to make it effective for a weekly work plan, or even sometimes a far more detailed pull.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would agree with that. It works well for phase pulls. And before excuse me, before Nialli kind of introduced a phase pull part to their program, we did our phase pulls in Miro and then transferred that information into Nialli for the weekly work plan. So it does work well for that. And it's easy to share. You can just share it with a link, right? And people can get into it. You don't have to install anything or anything like that.
And we've done the same. Is like most of our obviously as architect, we're on the front end of the process, so we always kind of brainstorm in Miro, and then part of that brainstorming board is a milestone pull, so it automatically has a bunch of other project information in there already. So on one hand, this is a really cool thing that Miro is like a massive, I guess, place where you can post your values, your condition of satisfaction, your, all sorts of team information, as well as start to do these things. And, I definitely have then translated, when we needed more detail, this into Nialli, to get the actual Last Planner system as a system going, because it makes it more rigorous.
Yeah, I would say, and I guess the other benefit of Miro, because it's essentially a whiteboard, you can paste all kinds of other things in there, right? Like you can throw drawings in there and all that stuff. You're not doing that in the other two that we've talked about. That being said, I think that some of the big drawbacks from Miro is you don't have kind of you're not putting in information that's kind of specific to task. You're doing it kind of manually, just digitally manually, is maybe a way to say it. It doesn't automatically calculate PPC, at least not that I'm aware of. From a construction standpoint, get it going any deeper than a phase pull, I wouldn't do it in Miro. I just wouldn't. There's a lot of work that would be required. And I would, to be honest, I would probably just use sticky notes at that point. Is what I would do from on the construction side of things. It just
I
doesn't
get-
have a lot of the stuff that a dedicated program does.
Yeah, I guess I should also preface, if my project is in town in the same city where I'm living, we will still do physical sticky notes. The weird thing about the pandemic is now our projects are all over the country, so we've had to adapt, and Miro has been really a godsend for that. It's like it makes it super helpful.
Absolutely. And I just, like I said, on Wednesday, I used Miro with it was with a design team that had designers in Vancouver, Calgary, Saskatchewan, all over to do a phase pull. So it does work well for, like I said, for the phase pull. I personally struggle with using it to really get the full extent of anything deeper than a phase pull with it.
Agreed.
Do you guys see a clear winner or loser, or are they just so different that, for personal preference, I mean, don't be afraid of hurting anyone's feelings here.
Well,
go ahead, Shafraaz. You can.
I would say if our clients can support the cost of Touchplan and can see the versatility, and I know a lot of the team will be hybrid or virtual. I like Touchplan because it's, again, visually more intuitive and appealing and has a lot of tools in the background, and it doesn't hurt my eyes. But frankly, I would say the second most, or well, actually the most popular tool we are using is Miro, and not just to pump Miro. There's a very similar version called Mural, so different company, but basically virtual whiteboard sticky note kind of thing. So Mural, Miro, all good.
Brian?
I'm gonna. This is gonna sound weird, but I'm gonna echo Shafraaz just a little bit with, if you take cost out of the whole thing, I think Touchplan's the best product that's out there. Now, we can never take cost out of the equation.
We should have done choosing by advantages here.
Well, you know what? It's the way that I explain it to some of the people around here is, Touchplan's like having a Ferrari, right? Yeah, you get a Ferrari, but it costs you what a Ferrari costs you. So the way that, at least I've been, when we've talked to them, is I don't have exact numbers because their pricing changes based on size of project and things like that. So that's where it becomes a problem. The one that I would choose out of these three, I would choose Nialli every day of the week because it's easy to use. The pricing is in line, and yeah, it's just our favorite product. Now, there's a couple other products that we're not talking about here that are out there as well, that are pretty darn good as well. I really like Refine My Sight from Bosch. But out of these three, Nialli would be my choice if all things being considered.
Okay, thanks guys. I think we're like near the end of our time here. My big takeaway from all of this is, expensive can be good. Like you said, having a Ferrari can be great. And yet, through all of this discussion, and including what we're doing currently, Miro is the one that is being used the most. So it's interesting to see those two sides. Like Touchplan is great, Nialli is great, but we're using Miro right now. So
I think there's almost a line there though too. Like I think that Miro's probably being used more on the design side and not as much on the construction side would be my take on it.
Okay, so thanks Brian, thanks Shafraaz. I don't know if we really have much time for Q&A. Maybe we can do a couple questions. But FYI, our next Lean Coffee is going to be in person. We're going to do a lean tour of the first City of Edmonton IPD project, the rehab and expansion of the Expo Center. This is Friday, October 20th from 9 to 11 a.m. Save the date in your calendar and join our LinkedIn page. I'm going to put those links in the chat. So if you have any questions, just, hands up or unmute yourself or whatever, and we'll bring this beauty to a close.
I also appreciated Tara's comments about the neurodivergent and the colors and the ways to look at it. That was really That's a really great comment. And yeah, there's lots of other graphic tools to try and test out.
Totally.
Yeah, and there are more than just the 3 that we talked about here today,
yes.
too.
Can you guys provide just in rough magnitudes what the costing is, like on a sort of a per project or per person? Like, I have no idea what the costing is for the 2 in actual dollars. You don't have to be precise, because obviously different scales of companies might get different pricing and stuff. But.
Yeah, you're like for Miro, we would kind of talk about that. Like, it can be free or it can be a few $100s a year depending on what you're doing with it. Nialli, based on buying, say, a pack of 5, I'll say 10 plans, you're looking at about anywhere between $3,000-$4,000 a year for those 10 plans, which means you can use it on 10 different projects if you wanted to. Touchplan, that's a hard one for me because I haven't talked to them about pricing in a while, but their pricing was, at least to contractors, was based on project size. So it scaled up or down based on if you're doing a $10 million job or if you're doing a $100 million job. So that and that can go up fairly rapidly, fairly quickly.
It gets into the thousands for
For one project, yes.
So in each case, you kind of buy it per project, but then they give you unlimited users so that you can get all the engagement of the subtrades.
Yeah, so that's the one
okay.
thing. That's the one thing with all these ones that we've talked about. There's no user limit on any of this stuff. You start getting into using, say, an Oracle product. Now you're talking about user-based pricing, which is a whole nother thing. Touchplan initially had that, I believe, way back when it was user-based, and like everyone was like, well, why would we do that? That makes no sense.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Anybody else? Any other questions from y'all? Negatory. Okay. Well, we're gonna share that Miro board in case you guys want to, refresh your memories down the road and see, how badly we complained about all these different planning tools.
I'm sure I'll get a call from one of the reps at some point.
Yeah. Thanks again, Brian, Shafraaz. Again, October 20th, I think it was, next Lean Coffee. So we look forward to seeing you guys then. And I hope you all have a great day. Thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.